This video is all about how Pan Pastels can be used to loosen up the portrait painting muscles. But first, like all my videos, we'll start with a coffee. And this particular brand is from a company called Hummingbird, and it's called Crave. I gotta say, for a supermarket brand, that one is pretty good. Must be, look at me go. The pastel paper I'm going to be working on for this demo is a Canson Pearl Grey Mi-Tinte. I've been looking that one up, Mi-Tinte. In French, Mi-Tinte means half tints or half tones. Now I'm self-taught. This is only like my 52nd, I think, 52nd painting. Which means I still know very little. I've only learnt what I need to know in order to get on and do the next painting. So I looked up some websites to discover what the deal is with tone paper. And I thought I'd share it on this video. Artisfun.com says, the tone of the paper refers to the lightness or darkness of any particular colour. Light tone paper will typically enhance and emphasize dark tone pastels. You can also create dramatic effects by contrasting light pastels on dark tone paper. Mid-tone papers, like what I'm using here, are used most commonly with pastels because they provide a balanced, harmonious background. The colour of paper is frequently used by pastel artists to create a number of subtle effects. You can select paper that harmonises with your pastel colours and has the effect of unifying the artwork. Or you can purposely contrast the paper colour with the pastels to create interesting atmospheric moods. Well, that's very interesting. I chose this particular pastel paper because it was in my stash at home. It was this all white, and while I don't mind using white with Pan Pastels, it works surprisingly well of making them even more vibrant than what they are. I thought actually Pearl Grey is probably a better option. I particularly wanted to use the grey for highlights in my subjects here and teeth. The Canson paper's got a textured side and a smooth side. The textured side's a little bit like orange peel, and a lot of pastelists don't like it. Here's some comments from a forum, Wet Canvas forum, talking about Canson Mi-Tinte. Whoever makes Canson had better get with the program. I've used my last piece for anything serious. I will probably use up the stock I have for sketching, but that is all it is good for, IMHO. I wouldn't even recommend it for a beginner. How frustrating to start out on something that is inferior, only to get inferior results. No wonder people quit before they get started. I know this sounds harsh, but I wish I had started out with better paper. What a reference. If you read that on Amazon, you probably would go, you know what, I'll pass. Oh look, I'm on to my second coffee. Yep, I gotta say, I go through a few coffees in this painting. Here's another person from the forum. With the energy and looseness I like to use in the early stages of my work, Canson just cannot hold up. I need a paper with tooth, and more tooth. I started with Canson 20 years ago and almost gave up pastels from frustration. Thankfully, I met Handel, who made us use sandpaper, and the rest is history. I could never figure out which side I liked better on Canson because the rough side had all that odd texture that I hated for my work, but the smooth side held even less pastel. I have to say that some of the artists whose work I admire use that stuff, and I just cannot figure out how they do it. Now, these aren't beginner artists like me. These are professional pastelists. And they believe that this paper isn't any good for beginners. You know, they don't know how people even get results from it. Well, here's the thing. I used to play this card game called 500. It requires you to, at the start of each round, say how many rounds you're going to win with your hand of cards. So you get 10 cards and you can say, oh, I'll win 6 tricks, or I'll win 7 tricks, or 8, 9, 10. A lot of people will only bid if their hand looks strong. So you can outplay them every time. They just won't bid unless they've got all the best cards. The thing is with that game, you can win even with what looks like a weak hand of cards if you're willing to risk it. And in my experience of life, that's just what life is like. I mean, look at me. I'm making this video with a budget camcorder. And while I've got one good studio light, my second studio light is one I made myself, thanks to an excellent YouTube channel on how to make LED lights. The drawing board I'm using is handmade. Again, thanks to another great YouTube channel. Would I prefer better equipment? Sure. But if I had that better equipment, it wouldn't change the outcome of what I paint here. So sometimes we just want to play with the hand we're dealt with and see what we can do with it. Constraining ourselves can make us see and think differently. It forces us to stretch our abilities. Speaking of which, you will have seen I was working on the eyes with pastel pencil to show how it can be done even on the textured side of this paper. And I'm going to come back to those eyes multiple times over the painting to try and get them right. The subject I'm painting here, I'm going to mangle her name, I'm so sorry. It's Jaga Theswari. I think that's how I say it. I just know her as Jaga. Jaga is a senior quality assurance tester in India. And I met her in July of this year, so that's 22 if you're watching this in 23 or any other year. And I think she may have reached out to me on a social Saturday event to connect with me. I went back through my messages to see how, what the initial conversation was, and I had a very stuffy, canned response to the connection at the time. And oh look, we're into another coffee. I've got to slow down. I tell you, it was a lot harder painting Jaga than what I imagined. And every time you see me have a coffee, at least another hour has gone by. That's why I've sped this up so much. I was burning through that crave coffee. So Jaga's. So what did I say? I said I responded to her request to connect, and I said, "Thank you for connecting, Jaga. I look forward to seeing your posts and comments, David." To which she said the appropriate canned response of, "Sure, David. I'm happy to connect too." Now, about that time, I probably had about 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, and she had around 4,000. These days, she has around 9,000 followers on LinkedIn. Compared to other social media, that might seem quite small. But LinkedIn was only designed to let you have 500 to 1,000 connections. It actually restricts you to connecting to more than 100 people a week. If you look at too many profiles or send too many messages or any other naughty social activity they believe in LinkedIn, you end up in what we call affectionately LinkedIn jail. It's like being sent to the timeout room for a few days, where you have to appeal that you're not a bot. So for Jaga to connect to another 5,000 people in the 3 or 4 months that I've known her is fantastic going for LinkedIn. Anyway, she was circling around some of my posts and we got to talking. And because we have both analytical backgrounds and a love of kitten gifts, we got on really well. And when I started this channel, Jaga was my first subscriber. And the banner you see on my channel was designed by her. I did the painting and she lit up the text. So I wanted to thank her by doing a painting of her. As I said, the painting of her was harder than I thought. It took me quite a while to get her eyes. The reference photo just really didn't give me the information I needed about her eyes. She says they're light brown, but I've put a lot of different colours in there, even turquoise. And getting the skin tones, it wasn't as much of a challenge as I thought it would be. As I keep saying in this series, I'm not trying to replicate the reference photo. There was already a lovely photo of Jaga. I don't need to duplicate that for her. I'm trying to capture something of her in the painting, how I feel about her. In this painting, I wanted to be loose. Here's what I've learned about loose painting. I think KerryWoodhouse.com puts it the best. Another word that is often used is painterly, as in a loose, painterly style. Broadly, both these words are describing a painting that is expressive, more about feeling than detail. An alternative is a hyper-realistic style where the painting is counted successful if it is almost an exact copy of a photograph. Well, in her photo, she doesn't have stripes on her lower arm. That just amused me as I was putting them on because she likes cats, and I thought I'm going to give her some tabby stripes on her arm because I thought that was quite funny. Anyway, DavidMKessler.com gives 8 techniques to help paint loosely. Painting loosely is a state of mind. Number 2, stand up to paint. I'm doing that. 3, always paint with large brushes. I'm using sponge applicators. 4, use plenty of rich, juicy paint. That absolutely describes Pan Pastels. 5, hold your brush by the tip of the handle. I don't know, I just hold it whatever way it feels right to me. 6, forget the details. Well, if you're using Pan Pastels and you see me doing the hair now, there's no way I'm going to fiddle around doing strands of hair with that big thick sponge you see me using. All I want to do is capture the flow and essence of her hair. I'm not trying to replicate it, I'm just trying to get a sense of it. And this, I think, was a Phthalo Blue shade that I used for her hair. Compose with large shapes. Well, you can see me doing that right there. But it's just shapes. We're not going for the detail. Limit your colour palette. Well, with Pan Pastels, I used about, I think, 26 different pans. That's a primary colour and a tint and a dark shade. So her clothing here, I am using a French Ultramarine. So she got dark blue hair and dark blue clothes. So you do have less of a palette with Pan Pastels, but you're able to blend them in quite amazing ways and get different variations. So I just find the tools and the palette great for loosening up my portraits and doing more how I feel about the person than trying to replicate them. And I was trying to fix on her forehead. You'll see me using my little eraser and a little electric eraser just to bring through the grey for her highlight. And I had to do this a few times around the forehead because it ended up looking like she collided with a wall or something and had a bit of a lump. Once I told my wife, she said I can never unsee that now, so I had to go back several times to try and fix it. And but you just see how that Pan Pastel is just so much like using paint. On this cotton-rich paper, it works beautifully, and most of the time I use the same applicator all the time. You'll see me wiping the applicator on kitchen towel, paper towels, and that just cleans it off, and then you just put on, load it up again with Pan Pastel. For her lips, I've got a favourite Phthalo, a little light pink one I use a lot for blending reds, and that seems to work quite well. And in between her teeth was a mixture of reds and very light blue to get the definition. You don't want to put too much detail into teeth, it looks a bit weird. I just wanted to get her smile, just a little bit of light blue dusting the top of the teeth, no white at all, and back into the eyes. I looked at her eyes and I went, oh, maybe because it's a grey background, and when you stand back, so when you're up close, you're looking quite intently at, as you can see, I'm looking super intently at what I'm doing. But when you stand back, the tone of the paper unifies the picture, and the colour changes. And you got to kind of rethink. Do I need to lighten this or darken that? And the eyes, just because of the grey around the portrait, we're looking a lot whiter when I stood back from it than up close. So I went to darken those just with yellows and blues. You see me trying to fix that bump on her forehead. And so most of the colours I've used here, lots of, oh look, here we go. You'll see me throwing in some Phthalo Green here. You go, even in her head. You go, what the heck? She hasn't got green in her face or on her arm. But it's a painting. What we're trying to do is get some energy into our portrait. We want to get the sizzle that's happening under her skin. And the green, to me, just felt right. You want to be a bit intuitive in how you paint things. It's not a rigid formula. But, you can paint that way, and some people do, and they just paint by the rules. That's lovely. I'm trying to get art from the heart. And I've never been one for following the rules too much. I'd much rather be intuitive about what I'm doing. How does it feel? Does this feel right? And the green just felt absolutely right in her arm to just make it pop. It just puts some interest in. And we're getting close to the end here. I thought I'd finished the painting. In fact, I'd put the signature on, and then I realised I'd really missed something. And right here, you'll see me just using a paintbrush, just gently to draw out the Pan Pastel. It's such a fantastic medium. You can use the sponges, you can use a brush. Just a beautiful way of painting. Very different from using sticks and pencils. But as I was doing this, I realised I've forgotten something. And it's the little mark in her forehead. I believe it's called a bindi. And it's important to not cancel someone's culture. You want to respect the things about them that are important to them. And so I'm glad I caught that. And just because most of the people I know in New Zealand don't have a bindi, doesn't excuse me from not doing one for Jager. And then I think, that's probably about it. And so I want to thank you for coming along, and hopefully you had a coffee or other beverages were acceptable while you watch this video. Already picked out my subject for the next couple of vids as well, and had a chat to them about doing their portraits. So I'll stick with portraits for a little while because I'm just trying to get better at doing them. And I hope you get a chance to use Pan Pastels in your painting as well. So I want to thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you again.